assist your governance efforts and to solve issues along with you that are of mutual benefit to industry and the government. So please, round of applause again for Mr. Booth. Thank you. Mr. Booth messed me up here. If that's our biggest problem of the day, then we're in good shape. Now I'm going to ask a distinguished panel of experts from both the government and industry to join us to the stage for some additional perspectives and a deeper dive into some of the areas that Mr. Booth discussed in his remarks. We asked Mr. Tony D'Astolfo to come and lead a panel. He led this panel last year, and he graciously accepted to come back to GovTravels again and discuss what's changed over the past year and reach out to some of today's travel industry leaders for their perspective as we look to the future and what it might bring. Tony obviously did a great job last year because they wanted to bring you back. Now, Tony has over 30 years of experience in the travel industry. He's the Senior Vice President North America for the travel tech company Serco, which is home ported in New Zealand, which he's graciously accepted to travel to the corporate headquarters several times. He's home ported. He himself is home ported in New York. Again, he volunteered again to run this panel. We greatly appreciate it, Tony. And please, again, continue to use the app to ask questions. We've got a really good panel lined up here. Tony, over to you, sir.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Yes, sir. Morning, everybody. All right, kick my slides up there. We're going to roll through some good stuff. I'm going to do a quick keynote, about 15 minutes of content, just to set the stage for the panelists. Then I'm going to bring them back up, and we're going to get into a conversation as we did last year. I've got 5 topics. I got a couple of others in this kind of a session we call Closer to the Truth. We should have a little time for your questions, so if you have them, fire away. Can we get my deck up there? Come on now. There we go. That's me. All right, let's get going. All right, so the session format I talked about, I'm going to frame the discussion, thought leadership panel. We're going to talk about Closer to the Truth, a little fun with that, and then closing advice from our experts will be up here in a second. The session I put together today is called The Most Powerful Companies in the World and How They Could Impact Government Travel. Nice, short, snappy title for a government audience, right? First thing I want to do is kind of define the word powerful, because sometimes it can have multiple meanings. In this particular case, I'm defining the word powerful by saying it's having great power, prestige, or influence. The 2 words I call out are power and influence. I'm going to further define power by saying it's the ability to produce an effect and have an influence over others. So that's the context by which I'm talking about today. So let me talk about the first tier of power, the most powerful companies in the world according to this guy standing up here today. First most powerful company, Google. Anybody use Google? Anybody not use Google? All right, so I use Google multiple times a day. When I first saw that Google was one of the most powerful companies in the world was a bunch of years ago, actually. And I have 2 daughters. I hate them both. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why in a second. My first daughter, why I hate her is because years ago, I watched her do a book report. She came home. I was working from home. She said, Dad, I got to do a book report. The book report is on pasteurization. And I remember doing this book report when I was a kid, and I watched what she did. She went to her computer. She went to Google. She typed in pasteurization, just like the old man. She didn't spell it right, but Google corrected it for her. Did you mean pasteurization? And then literally within seconds, she had reams of information that she printed off, and all of what she needed to do the book report was there for her. And it took about 10 minutes for her to do that. Then I remember doing that same book report. That's the Mitchell Linden branch of the Queens Public Library. That was about 14 blocks from my house. So when I got this book report, I walked to the library. I was sitting there looking at the Dewey Decimal System. You're all laughing because I didn't remember how to use it either. So I got yelled at by the librarian. I went, found the book. I snuck to the back of the library where the photocopier was. Nobody was looking. I broke the binding so I could copy 2 pages for 1/4. All right, it took me a long time to get 2 pages of research. I went home and did my book report based on 2 pages of research. And then I realized, watching my daughter do this, that's why I hate her. Her life is so much easier than mine as a result of a company called Google. I said I had 2 daughters. I hate them both. The second one I hate because I paid for 6 years of private education. And I drive a Honda because I could have been driving a Porsche. All right. Next up, second most powerful company in the world. How many of you use Apple products? Anybody? Okay, we got some government folks that do. People line up for this stuff. When you think about the phone today, it's not a phone anymore. It's actually a device that does so much more. I would say the phone is probably one of the more lesser use cases of the devices that we carry. Apple has been a phenomenal company at leading design, simplification, ease of use, and just thinking beyond what this little device could do. It is so powerful now, it kind of runs all our lives. We could probably not live without it. So for that, they become one of the most powerful companies in the world. They extend that by now taking the device and making it even more simple, right? So you just shout into the device, hey, Siri, I need something. And Siri responds back to you, oftentimes leveraging Google. Right? Oftentimes leveraging another powerful company. All right, third most powerful company, Amazon. How many of you avoided this Christmas? Went straight to Amazon, okay? My story with Amazon many years ago, my wife was not a good cook, and I decided that I was going to get her, I saw this, I said, Rachel Ray 15-minute meals. I said, how hard can it be, 15 minutes? So I go to Amazon, I order the book. Now, that didn't work out that well with my wife, but the point of the story is that the next time I went back to Amazon, and this is years ago, it started to recommend things to me. It started to get very personal. What it says to me is, Tony, you enjoyed this, you might like that. And what was it presenting to me? It was keying in on 2 things. One, cooking, but the second thing with time. Time was precious to me. So everything it sent back to me focused in on the ability to cook and the ability to use time, okay? So you think about personalization today, you think about the way Amazon has completely changed the shopping experience. I would call them one of the most powerful companies in the world. And they're going way beyond that. Amazon is all over the place in the cloud. They're doing so many other things, buying Whole Foods, buying companies, changing the way we shop, changing the way we move, changing the way we do things. So for that, they get in my top tier, first tier of power. I just got my parents. This is funny. I've got a 92-year-old dad and an 86-year-old mom with dementia. They're still together. They still live at home. I got them an Amazon Echo the other day. They don't have a cell phone, so I had to get an Amazon Connect to connect it to the house. And I brought it there, and I said, Ma, you can just say, Alexa, what's the weather? And so she said, who's Alexa? Right? When she said, who's Alexa, Alexa responded because she heard the trigger come up. And the machine starts to talk, and she goes, who, so it's a work in progress, but I'm telling you it's going to work. But anyway, think about how Amazon changes the way you perceive, how Amazon creates this very personal relationship based on the technology. Okay, fourth company that I put in the top tier of power is Facebook. How many Facebook users do we have out there? All right, so let me tell you my power story on Facebook. I have 2 sister-in-laws. They're both power Facebook users. My one sister-in-law posts everything she does, everything she does. In this particular case, she went on a vacation. She posted pictures from the vacations. And what happens then? You get the recognition. People start to say, oh, I like. The second sister-in-law didn't do anything. She didn't like, she just didn't comment. The first sister-in-law now has a problem because the second sister-in-law didn't comment. Okay? I say Facebook is one of the most powerful companies in the world because 2 people who never said a word to each other will never talk to each other again. All right, so that's funny, but the real power with Facebook is when you think beyond funny stories like that, you think about creating communities and influencing people, okay? Facebook has allowed communities to be created across the world, diverse people in multiple places, all over the place, very quickly, all of a sudden create a common bond. And that common bond then leads to influence. And Facebook can then influence. And they can create this community that further influence. So power, influence, Facebook, first tier company. Now let's talk a little bit about the second tier. Second tier of power, how many of you tweet? How many of you are on Twitter? So not that many. There's a couple folks that were on Twitter in 2016, right? Now I would suggest to you, the reason why I bring this up is not because of all the tweeting that was going on. What I look at is, I see the president today, and I say, he communicates in 280 characters. 280 characters at a time, okay? He is reaching an audience directly. He is circumventing traditional communication methods. Okay, I heard briefly about a 17-page, I think I heard, 17-page document that is used to engage your audience and let your audience know about whatever, the policy, okay? We've moved to 280 characters. That's about what people get now. That's what they want. They want it fast and quick. So for that reason alone, I stick Twitter in my second tier of power. The way they've changed the way people communicate. Communicating directly, creating communities, but doing it fast and very direct, okay? Another company in my second tier of power, Netflix. How many of you have Netflix users? Why are they so powerful? They can take a perfectly healthy human being and put them on a couch for the entire weekend while they binge watch TV. All right? So how many of you like House of Cards? I didn't like the last season. I know you're government folks here. I thought it was a little, you needed the guy. You know what I mean? He was just part of the show. But anyway, the point about this is that what Netflix has done is they've given you the power to control your experience. You don't have to wade through commercials. If you want to binge watch for 14 straight hours, you can do that. Okay, so I look at that, and I put that in there as I say, they're giving you tremendous amount of control around the experience that you're going to have. That piece of technology is saying, here it is. It's all here. All the content's here. I put it all together for you. Consume it as you'd like. So it's up to you to determine how you will consume it, okay? Uber. How many of you use Uber? Okay, why is this the most powerful company in the world? Because they got every cab driver in the world to hate them. Actually, that's not why they're so powerful, because most cab drivers look like this before Uber. But why do I put them in there? Because they took this device and they created an entire business, a transportation business around this device. They don't own vehicles. All they did was say, we're going to use this device to connect people that have cars to people that need to get somewhere. They took the mobile platform and the functionality that Apple and others created to completely change the way we get around town, okay? The perception of how you travel today is changed by Uber. It is that simple. It is that easy to do something, okay? So for that reason, I put them in my second tier of power. So what's the point of all this? Why do I talk about these companies being so powerful, and how they impact a government or any program? When I think about these companies, or when you think about these companies, when we think about these companies, what words come to mind? I actually went online in Google, and I said, when people are asked to describe Google, Amazon, Facebook, these very powerful companies, what are the words that they use? What are the emotions? What are the words that they use to describe these companies? And these are the words they use. They use cool, simple, handy, efficient, useful, intuitive, convenient, personal, smart, fast, committed, easy, excellent, addictive, okay? So as the backdrop, when you think about whatever it is you do for a living, whether you're part of DTMO, whether you're a supplier serving government employees, whether you're a travel management company, whether you're an airline, doesn't matter. When you think about yourself, what emotions or words do people use to describe you and the services you provide? Okay? Would you like to change that? Is it possible to change it? And if you could, how could you do it? Right? So in the context of these very powerful companies that influence people, that actually change the way they live, And then we put that over to you. How do people think about them? Cool, intuitive, smart, addictive. And now we look at you, and you say to me, hey, you know, I'd love to be thought of as cool and addictive and easy and simple. Any one of the words. Pick any one of them, and then put yourself in the position to say, how can you do that? I would suggest that one of the ways to start thinking about this is more broadly, depending upon where you are and what service category you provide, is you think more generically about the life cycle of a trip. Okay, we often think about the first part of the trip, which is where you get your orders and you start to plan and search, but the trip has an entire life cycle. Okay, so as my first suggestion to you, I would say regardless of what business you are in and how you are serving employees or government employees, doesn't matter. If you are helping them book or prepare, or if you're helping them with an in-trip experience, think about the entire life cycle of the trip and think about how they are going to experience it. Think about how you are going to be involved in that experience and how you could potentially impact it, right? So when you think about where do I want my power and influence to come from, based on all of that context, ask yourself these questions. How do you want to be perceived? It doesn't sound like one of the initiatives, and no offense to anyone in the room, but one of the initiatives was the initiative is to simplify it, to make it fast, to make it easy, okay? So if you say, I just want to break down one process. I heard something this morning about we took 10 minutes off getting the credit card reissued. Okay, now that's big. That made it simple, easy, fast, right? So I would say that's a micro example of exactly what you want to be doing when you consider the bigger context of how these powerful companies influence. Be mindful of the touch points. You're going to touch people throughout the life cycle of the trip. Think about when they're sitting in their office planning a trip, very different when they're in the middle of the trip. Flight just got canceled, what do I do? Okay? How do I turn big data into small, powerful experiences? So somebody's trip is delayed, somebody's trip is canceled, whatever it is. How do you jump in and create something that could be magical and that can addict them to your service? Aspire to serve in ways that leave powerful impressions. Again, you can do small little things to create powerful impressions, powerful lasting impressions. And then finally, contemplate the customer's needs before they do. You're subject matter expert at what you do. You do it all day, every day. They do it when they travel. Okay, so even if somebody is a frequent traveler, 2-3 times a month, they're still not going to have the level of subject matter expertise that you will. If you start to think about the entire life cycle of the trip, and you think about how they're going to have to experience all of that, think about how you can impact them in very small ways. So that's all from me. I want to thank you for that setup. That's my email. If you want to disagree with anything I said, I will absolutely respond back to you. And now I'd like to bring up my panelists so we can use that as the jump-off point for the panel we're going to do now. So they're out there in the audience. Can my panelists come up? I've got 5 of them. You know the session format again. Let me just go ahead. You could click the next slide because I'm going to introduce them. Go back to my PowerPoint. There we go. Jamie Kaiser, VP Global Services Operations, SAP. This is not Jamie. I'm guessing you guessed that, though, right? There's Jamie. Hi, Jamie. Take the first seat. Don Moore, VP Rental Sales and Global Corporate Accounts and Enterprise Holdings. Welcome, Don. Erica Moore, no relation, VP and GM U.S. Sales for Travelport. Where's Scott Smith?
I'm here.
There he is. He snuck up on me. Good to see you. All right, Scott Smith is Program Manager, Department of Defense Travel Modernization. And finally, Nick Vernakis, President, U.S. Military Government, CWT SATO. Thank you all for participating. What you have here is a cross-section. Technology company, supplier, GDS, travel management company, and then you actually have somebody who's in the middle of it all, right? So this is a great panel cross-section of folks that are industry experts. So what I'm going to do first is open up the first question. I'm going to jump down here because I like to face the panel as I do it. And so here's topic number 1, personalization. Remember Amazon. Remember how I set this up. So here we go. Will the impact of Amazon increase consumer demand for a one-stop shop for travel? Think beyond the travel experiences, not just booking the airline trip, the hotel, the rental car. How are they getting to and from? All right, are they going to use Uber? What else is going on? One-stop shop for travel. Will the expectations of a personalized shopping experience be part of future travel purchases? And then finally, can government travel be part of this? Who would like to start? Erica, go.
So
Ladies first.
I think it already is, Tony. I don't think it's something that will it. I think it's absolutely now at the center of the travel expectations. In a recent survey that we launched, over 50% of travelers today just book everything through their mobile application.
Right.
Now, for government, this is even more important. If you think about the 60, 70,000 new recruits every single year, and many times these young soldiers, it's the first time that they're going to be traveling to this, this length, and many times to places that, are unheard of for them. So personalized experience, making it easy, and being able to apply predictive analytics to the patterns of behaviors of these types of travelers that are traveling for the first time absolutely must be at the forefront of what we focus on for government travel.
Okay. Nick?
Yeah, the one element I would add is that one thing that I think is very unique about the business travel as an industry is that we don't just deal with travelers as consumers. They are travelers, but they are employees. So we have to have this governor in place that is even smarter to ensure that we are meeting not just the needs of our service members and the needs of our travelers, but that we do it in a context that makes it, for all intents and purposes, error-proof, right? Because, I think you can, addressing a sort order to fit on a 3x4 inch screen at the end of the day is very, very easy. But you have to kind of take into account not just how a traveler is going to consume information, but also what the right boundaries look like and what the right governor looks like for that decision making.
Sure, absolutely. You got the whole idea of there's a management layer that has to be applied here. So it can't be overly personal enough to know that these are personal tastes, but they also work for the government, right?
Yeah, but it has to be. Sorry, it has to be convenient.
Yep.
There has to be convenience built into it. When you look at ground transportation, it's not just about car rental, although that's very near and dear to my heart. It may be ride hailing versus car rental, or there needs to be choice within that process that allows customers, or in this case, soldiers or whoever, government travelers, to be able to pick and choose which way they can go. There has to be some kind of a built-in mechanism that helps them get to that platform.
While they might have a driver's license, they might not be comfortable driving, specifically in a city that they're unfamiliar with, right? Things like that, small little snippets of information.
Car and driver versus car rental.
Exactly.
Ride hailing versus car rental, whatever.
Jamie, you're going to jump in?
Yeah, I agree with the group completely, and I think it's finding that balance between personalization, but knowing the rules and the details behind the scenes, or keeping the guardrails in place, but you've got to make it easy. And I think what you said earlier about Amazon personalizing it is an added benefit, certainly needed.
Scott, anything you guys are doing, thinking about, already there?
Just not every person runs into the same travel rules. Essentially, there will be things that, as you go about your travel experience, you're going to be more likely to run into one rule or one flag that you hadn't seen before. So you can learn as you go. But then, as I look at future trips, then I can apply those rules, or the intelligence can help me understand how to apply those rules and avoid things that I really wasn't intending to do in the first place.
Yep. Good point. Anybody else, audience? Show of hands. Everybody good? Question, comment, anything? So small, it's already there. Make sure you understand the bigger context, right? Make sure you provide them with options that might not be readily apparent if you're even enterprise in the game of saying, hey, I'll drive you if you don't feel comfortable driving. Make sure the tech is good. All right, topic number 1, we'll put it to bed. Topic number 2, rise of the traveler. In the business side of the house, enabling technologies have provided consumers and travelers with more capabilities to self-serve. You talked about new recruits. My guess is new recruits have had a phone for probably 8 years, right? Since they're like 10, 11 years old, right? Yeah, seriously. I mean, this is what they're doing, so they're more capable. People in China don't have computers. They only have phones, okay? All right. Business travel has changed significantly, with more emphasis on the travel and the need to remove friction from the trip. Now, friction can be defined as a bunch of different things. Don't make me connect if there's a nonstop. Don't make me take an early morning departure if it's not necessary, right? This often results in giving travelers more flexibility to determine what is right for them. Sounds like a perfect recipe for the government. Give them plenty of flexibility to do it your own. Okay, maybe not. Set against the need to manage expenses, comply with policies and directives, and maintain a strict duty of care, can a tech-enabled traveler-first approach work in government travel? You want to go first, or you want to save it to last?
I would say absolutely it can.
Okay.
I think it's a difference in perspective sometimes. I don't think people, when they plan their trip, they intentionally look to how can I exploit every possibility to get everything that's good for me and doesn't provide a benefit to the government. I think most of the people who travel, they travel as stewards. We provide a service. As civil servants or as members of the military, we serve the public good. So don't get me wrong, it's important to still make sure that what we do is within the context of what's permissible, allowable, and appropriate, but it's not that we're really trying to get something for us usually.
Tony, I think in the business world, it's evolved because a lot of the businesses out there have contacted, vendors, partners, and so forth to really build a product together. I think that's where, within the government piece, I would highly suggest that we engage with suppliers and others out there to make sure that whatever you all are building, we are building it together. So you're not building something that we cannot provide, or it's harder for us to provide, and so forth. So we only have to really engineer it once.
Might he have been the person who asked Mr. Booth the last question? Can we help?
Yeah.
No, it makes perfect sense. It really does. Because as suppliers, you have a frame of reference that oftentimes is broader. It includes the business community, it includes the leisure community. So why not take advantage of that when they're kind of working their scope of effort? Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, we see that if it isn't easy, right, or it creates friction, they just go elsewhere, right? So I think the importance of the managed travel program to ensure folks can get the information they need quickly and on the types of devices and platforms they're using is critical, and certainly the tech companies can provide that and are doing so today.
I want to stay with you for a second on that, because TripLink actually addresses that.
That's right.
Right? TripLink
That's right.
was built because if people can't, or they're not happy in their current environment, then let them
to
go
the
somewhere
websites,
else.
they
Go to a
exactly. And
Yep.
the travel managers were struggling to figure out how they maintained their buying
Control.
power, right? And so TripLink gave it a way to bring the data all into the same place, so they could still leverage the use of the suppliers without booking in the same site all the time.
Okay, now I'm going to come to my two suppliers who probably don't want people jumping off the farm, right? Because jumping off the farm means they might be buying direct and not through the GDS, maybe circumventing the travel management program. So your take on finding that happy balance, Erica?
So I actually think that mobile is one of the most powerful tools, and particularly in the case of the government, right, for duty of care. Right? What a better way to make sure that you know exactly where your employees are at every single point in time, and when something has deviated from that plan other than your mobile. Now, in order to make sure that the compliance is there, that the security is there, that the preferred vendors are being utilized, there are now artificial intelligence tools. And let me just state an example. There's a tool being launched with IBM that precisely focuses on making sure that the compliance of the policy is taking place. Now, you can do that in a way to make sure that everything that's coming through your mobile is exactly what that policy wants it to be. So, before you were hearing about whether it's 17 pages or someone not understanding, if you are able to apply predictive analytics to the travel patterns of an individual in a particular situation and match that up with your policy, you're taking all of that hassle away from the traveler, which is exactly what you want, while at the same time making sure that it comes back through your booking tool, through your process and your policy. That is absolutely making sure that you use technology to serve the purpose not only of security, of optimizing a customer experience, but ultimately of making sure that you optimize what you're all about. So it's perfect world for all.
Nick, how are you guys removing friction? Practical examples.
So I think that TripLink for me is a great example of kind of being very clear about what problem you're trying to address. So if the problem is leakage, if the problem is getting people into the system, you have two options. You either connect the ecosystem together, which is what I think Concur has done, or you try to build a better mousetrap.
Exactly.
So, you know, the idea that you're going to suck people in based on delivering kind of world-class user experience. I think no matter what, it's incumbent upon industry as a whole to figure out how we work together to solve the collective problem, because all of us have some amount of self-interest at the end of the day, but it's a very broad ecosystem, and the more we're connected and the more we talk to each other, the less worried I think we get about, you know, are we losing visibility of travelers because they're going direct? Are we ensuring that we're maximizing kind of the value of our aggregated buying power? So you got to suck people in with a better mousetrap.
Yeah,
And I
you
think
can't help but as a supplier think myopically to say, how do I best serve that client? But if we all got in a room, there might be bits of information, right? So if Don's got a tracking device in the car, you know, can he tell the hotelier that the traveler's 5 minutes out? Probably could, right? And then the whole experience at the desk, if it was busy, right, could be transformed.
Yeah, it goes to your point about considering the journey rather than
Exactly.
just that
But
small
again,
role
we're
you
in
might
silos today, so hopefully at some point in the future, we all get in a room and say, you know, why don't we all start to trade info? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a perfect example. I mean, we have, you know, 100,000 vehicles that will be connected this year. Year 2000
Connected vehicles.
Connected with, yes. So in 2020, all of our 2 million vehicles will be connected. We'll be able to do things like working with all of these folks to really understand where the driver's at, what the driver's doing, as much information as we want to work together on. I think that's where you can do that. The hotel can know we're coming.
Yep.
The parking garage can know there's a car going to be parked there, so forth and
Yep.
so on.
And I'm told, I want to verify this, I'm told that we'll also be able to tell who actually smoked in the car. I'm just saying.
I cannot answer.
Erica, go ahead, close us down on this one.
To that point, you know, one of the challenges that, and it's no minor challenge that has often been talked about in the industry amongst suppliers, right, is how much, let me take it back. We hear about NDC, and the airlines want to take control of the end traveler again, right? And then we're talking about sharing the PNR and sharing the frequent flyer information. If you look at where we are today, that seems to be, you know, where we hit a bottleneck. Is people don't want to lose control of what they think they own about the traveler. And one of the main concerns there is that ultimately what we're hearing from young travelers is, I don't want anyone to own me other than myself. And I want to make sure that I own my own information. Now, if you bring that over to government, it becomes even more complicated because in many instances for, you know, government employees or soldiers or recruits, do we want to share that information and amongst who? So it definitely needs to be addressed, but it's not an easy problem to solve for.
It's a great point. When you think about airlines, they hold on to and they restrict access to their loyalty programs because they think, hey, this is my bread and butter. It's how I know my best clients. But if they were sharing that more liberally, they could create a very different experience for the traveler. So good point. My daughter's one of those people that said she wants control, but she did it after I paid for the college. So anyway, all right. Let's move on. Topic number 3. Topic number 3 is time doesn't stand still, neither does innovation. So technology advances at a rapid pace. Demographics change in the workforce. We talked about new recruits, always trending younger. Right? Everything trends younger, unfortunately for us that are on the back end of that. And young people think and act differently. We've all had that experience, right? We continue to have that experience. So the question today is, can today's travel programs, business and government, survive as presently constructed? Or does this need to be, we need to address the new persona, these young people that have been brought up differently, that act differently? Jamie, start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we totally have to change and adapt. as we see the younger generation entering the workforce, they're not embracing information in the same way. And yeah, there is very much this control aspect. And part of it, I think, is they're almost their entire lives, they've had this instant gratification, information at your fingertips all the time. You know, I was thinking about the travel policy conversation, and if we could break it down into Twitter feed chunks, I bet we could really get the rules across, and folks would follow them. So I do think we have to embrace change. I think what we see DoD doing and the organization Scott's running is absolutely embracing the change, and we have to do it or we'll be left behind.
Yep. Don't do that ever again. All caps. This is not fake news.
That's right.
That's it.
Hashtag.
All right. So, Don, demographics. Do you guys track demographics in terms of younger travelers? Are you creating products specifically for them?
Yeah, I mean, we track it, one, because we hire,
Young people.
hundreds of thousands of young employees to come work for us. So there's a big change in how you
Yes,
bring on
run
a
company.
new workforce.
Yep. You guys have a phenomenal,
And
entry-level
it's,
management
you know,
program.
we work very closely with universities, but now all the technology that's involved, I looked at a newspaper when I first started to work for Enterprise, and I'm assuming that doesn't happen today. I haven't looked for a job in 32 years, so I hope it doesn't. But, everything is changing. I mean, for years, we told our kids, don't get in cars with strangers. Now we encourage them to get in cars with strangers. So I think that everything evolves over time. And yes, from a traveler standpoint, we talked about the comments were innovate. What were the other ones that were on top? Empower and so forth and so on top screen earlier. That is what we are looking at every day. We have to be able to supply something to our end user renters, both from a government, corporate, doesn't matter. We have to innovate, and we have to give them choice. It has to fit into policy. I completely understand that, not just for government, but for business as well. But I think that we need to give them more choice. And again, I think that, as an example, do you want someone to be inconvenienced? We spoke earlier about saving man hours and so forth. Do we need someone to be more inconvenienced to do this versus doing something different just to save something? Can we make it a little bit of an easier path for them to get different things, either, rental car or car sharing or Uber or whatever that plan may be?
I would suggest, and you can tell me it's probably, your strategy, not mine,
Sure.
but you have to think about the whole car sharing and getting involved in mobility.
Absolutely.
Because my younger daughter doesn't have a driver's license.
Yeah.
She doesn't feel the need to drive herself, ever.
Yeah. We in the future,
Which is good. That's a good thing, because
we used to be called car rental. We're now mobility consultants.
right.
We have to figure out how to get someone from A to B.
Scott, how does that inform what you guys are thinking about?
Well, I would just counter that from an innovation standpoint, and seeing the powerful companies is a good reminder too. I mean, the lifeblood of the organization should be new ideas. Those new ideas don't only come from people who are younger.
Yep.
So we must remember that they need to come from, whether it's organizational changes or just, frankly, a priority on whether it's continuous process improvement or business process reengineering, like you heard Mr. Booth mention, or just on thinking differently about the situation. So this is an opportunity for us, a time for us to think very differently. But it won't be only the young people who do that thinking differently. Certainly we will need the inputs from that demographic as well.
Totally agree. Experience counts, right? And experience can be significant, especially when you're launching something new, because there's a lot of learnings that happen from past experience. Erica, your take on the demographic conversation?
So I think, I mean, there's a saying in Spanish, and I don't know if it's going to translate well into English, but what it says is, if the young knew and the old could, what a world this would be. So you have to combine things, absolutely. I don't know how many of you out there heard about, the question here today was, can we take pictures and can we post them? Mm-hmm. This is amazing, right? And the young kids, it's Snapchat, it's Instagram, like now we've created an app where, and I mentioned this in another conference a while ago, in Europe, you take an Instagram picture and automatically, for EasyJet, it will start to feed you. You don't have to say where it is. You just take a picture and it starts to feed you flights and hotel information so that you can stay in that place. Can you imagine, for bringing it back to government, someone on a critical mission someone very young posts a picture and hello, government security.
Correct.
Everybody knows
Correct.
exactly
Right.
where you are,
Right.
right? Not so cool. So while, I'm with you, you've got to filter what the objective is, because you need to be able to incorporate the personalized aspect of the sharing, the community, what that does, because it means a lot to young people to be able to share these things, and it's more about, again, the experience, sense of community, but you need to be able to filter that and bring that back in with what you're trying to drive at and what you're trying to obtain, and it needs to be always with the purpose. And last but not least, talking about technologies and the younger crowds, we think they're all about sharing and Alexa and, voice and mobile. Let me share this statistic with you. It was, it came to light that 85% of people interviewed said that they would not stay in a hotel room that was powered by Alexa.
That's because they're buying dirty movies.
That's what I thought,
mean,
too.
we
That's
know
exactly what I thought.
And that's where my mind went immediately.
That's what I thought.
72% of this audience, no, I'm kidding.
But what that says is that while it is about sharing, it is about staying connected, there's a limit.
That's the balance, right? And so I want to come to Nick last, but Scott, that's what you have to figure out, right? It's like making sure we strike that right balance, because I don't want them necessarily taking the picture. So maybe are there any plans underway to say, we're going to create a private network of just government people versus, sharing with the entire world?
We do have, as we're doing this prototype with SAP Concur, we do have specific requirements about what it is that we're trying to prototype, and one of those prototyping requirements is specifically regarding the security nature of the environment, and absolutely, it's on our roadmap.
Okay, and Nick, I'm going to end it with you here, because I know you guys have invested quite a bit in terms of building out the infrastructure around removing this, or addressing the demographic changes.
Well, ironically, I feel like we overhyped this idea of this being kind of addressing the millennials and being an age, a discussion about age. I think what we know about the younger generation is that they're all digital natives, number one, and I think it's just human nature now that we consume information on demand. So as we build out, it doesn't even have to be a travel program. As we build out, anything related to our employee population, we just have to take this into account, that over time, everybody will be a digital native, so operating on a phone versus a desktop. So you might, we, as an example, we kind of do everything mobile first, and then we figure out how to port to the desktop. And you just have to make information easy to consume.
Yep, okay. Any questions, by the way, or I'm just going to keep plotting? We got a bunch of questions. All right, well, we'll keep plotting along. I got 2 more topics, then we'll come back. We got some time for questions. All right, topic number 4, fast and easy. You heard me talk a lot about those 2 words, fast and easy. Technology strives to make things simple, fast, and easy. Given everything involved, will government travel ever be simple, fast, and easy? Don't all jump at this one.
I'll start.
Go.
So I think fast and easy, probably, and simple is a bit of TBD. I mean, simple is a product of the guardrails that you want to put out there to govern decision making. And I think that this is a journey. I think the government's made a lot of strides towards simplification, but I think it'll boil down to how much trust do you want to put in the hands of decision makers versus building enough construct around every potential decision, permutation, combination that you want to address up front. Otherwise, you just overburden technology, and that's not really solving the root of the issue.
Excellent point. Jamie?
Some of it's relative, right? So what is simple, fast, and easy to you might not be to someone else. And I've been working with DOD and federal civilian agencies for over 15 years, and I sort of laugh sometimes when there's change is hard, right? So there might be a system or something they're using that really isn't simple, fast, or easy. They move to something new that is faster or simpler, and they hate it. but just because they don't know it anymore. And so I think there's the element of change that we have to factor into it. But also recently we had someone booking a first trip, like we talked about in the new system with DTM, and one of the comments was the travel booking was super easy. The piece they got hung up was allocations. But they followed it up with, but it's because we created it that way. Our policies and our rules make it a little bit more difficult. So we can't blame the government and say, well, everything you do is really hard, so it's going to always make it difficult. I think we have to balance using the technology that puts behind the scenes the things you don't have to see or deal with, and then making that front end user experience much easier for you. It's not easy, but I think we're getting much closer.
Yep. Go ahead, Don.
I think, so booking through the right channels, I mean, that through either the TMC or the platforms that are supplied by Concur and so forth, that makes things easier because the right information is flowing into the system. Using technology for us, we have tablet technology at all of our home city branches. So I think we have 62 locations where we're on site at military bases around the U.S. And we have the ability now to do the process at the car with the customer at any time they want to do it. So we've gotten rid of all the administrative burden on the standing at the counter and so forth. So that speeds up the transaction. So that's when you get the ease and speed and so forth and so on. And I think that, so the more information we can do to get, again, I get back to working together to have that information downloaded either through a loyalty system or through a system where you're booking the vehicles, I think just makes the world a lot easier to rent cars when you're in the military.
That's a great example of the life cycle of the trip. Somebody booked the car. Now we're in the experience. We actually got off the plane. We're going to go check in. We're going to go somewhere. We got orders, and we're going to a military installation. You got to pick up the car. Making it faster and easier is
rental's not sexy. I know that's a shock, but it's renting a car and returning a car. But there has to be a lot of different things. There's journey assessment up front. Where you're going? Can we help you get to where you're going in some type of way? And then on the back end, how can we deal with the expense piece and all those things that come with it? And then during the process, things go wrong. How do we fix them?
Yeah. So if you're thinking about the entire life cycle of the trip, there's 3 or 4 places where you could interact, and that's what you're going for. Erica?
Well, actually, if you think about being able to, what you mentioned earlier, use big data and turn it into a personalized experience. That's where we think that technology is going to play a huge part. And for platforms that connect suppliers and travelers, that's going to be huge for us. If you think about it, we're trying to depersonalize the PNR. So what that means is we will turn every single PNR into a traveler persona prototype. And therefore, you will be able to identify the patterns of behavior, what cars, what hotels, what airlines, what preferred stays, even what restaurants, if you will, if you tie that into the credit card spend. And if you think about looking into the data first, the patterns first, the behavior first, the preference first, and then tying that back into your policy, you can start simplifying your policy very, very quickly. But more importantly, instead of having, please forgive me for the expression, but an army of people looking at the information and the policy, you can put the analytics to work. You can put these predictive analytics and artificial intelligence to work with the patterns and say, this would be the optimal point of your policy. And all of this, we're not that far away from that. We really are not. All of the elements are there. It's just taking the data analytics and the predictive capabilities up a notch, and you can get there. Now, the issue is, again, bringing it back to security. If you're able to identify these patterns that drive these patterns, someone cracks the code, and it could be an issue.
Scott, we're going to close it with you as the practitioner.
So this one, it's actually not as much of a practitioner perspective. I'll try not to make this take too long, but it just sort of hit me. I was listening to a conversation yesterday in one of the breakouts related to the toll tag and the rental car, and is there a way to make that so it really, when I think of simple, fast, and easy, what could be simpler, faster, and easier? Now, there's a cost, and I did some research last night. $4 a day with one vendor, not necessarily everybody, to a cap of 5 days' worth. Now, for our policy, that must be specifically approved by someone before you can make that simple, fast, easy decision. I think that it's an interesting, essentially our travel policy reflects our corporate culture. There are places where simple, fast, and easy is the corporate culture view of how they should do everything, and therefore their travel policy oftentimes will reflect that. Ours, we just are a little bit more bureaucratic in how we corporately approach, but that also reflects in the things we do. But at the same time, there is real money involved in here. You take this times 4 million travelers, and that's going to come at a cost. But then there's an HR side of that cost too. If I have to pull over and pull out a bunch of quarters because it doesn't even take dollar bills, you know, there's some really interesting challenges there. So just, it's a different perspective.
Good point. But again, thinking through the entire life cycle of the trip. All right. Our last topic is called upselling. Upselling has become a major focus for suppliers. Would you like the bigger car today? Would you like the bigger seat on the airline? Would you like an upgraded room, right? It's part of the way suppliers, you know, make additional dollars. Matter of fact, Skift suggested that this was one of the top trends of 2019, more upselling. So, should this trend be a concern to manage travel programs, or do the present controls that we have in place limit exposure? Okay? So I'm sure, please, thank you, Don. I figured you'd be first up.
You said the key words, managed travel experience. So if you have a policy and you're renting through the right system, the system's loaded with what, you know, it comes
What's
up on our
allowed.
system, what you can sell, what you can't sell, what you shouldn't even offer, and so forth and so on. So I believe that the more that is booked in the right paths, will take care of that all in itself. Now, there will be situations where you have 3 individuals come in and they had booked a compact car and that just doesn't work for their trip because they're all bigger than me. Yep. And so, you know, there has to be that leeway as well, and offer, or however you want to put it. But from our standpoint, if it's in the right policy and going through the right channels, there is not an upselling issue.
Game, you wanted to jump in, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's where the managed travel program comes into play, because a lot of times folks just don't know. Someone mentioned earlier, even if I travel 3 or 4 times a year, that's not what I do every day, right? So I'm not going to remember that I shouldn't buy insurance, or that I need to sit in this type of fare. And you can't expect people to remember that or understand it, right? And so I think it's really about making sure we put the information out in a way that I understand, oh, I have this set of choices because it's within my policy and I don't need insurance, or I don't need to add these add-ons, but where I have some leeway to buy the additional services because I need them, I should certainly be allowed to do them when the situation warrants it.
Okay, how about the situation where you book your trip and then the supplier reaches out, which happens very regularly, right? So every time I'm going to take a trip, the day before, or actually I will get an email 2 days before that says, prepare for your trip. Part of the prepare for my trip is always an offer to buy something, right? So as they market directly, okay, you're now in the program, you're in policy, but what happens next, right? I mean, is there the potential to, you know, for something bad to happen, which, you know, buy that upgraded seat, whatever. So how do we deal with the idea that, particularly the airlines do a really aggressive job with this, right? They've all created their basic economy class now, and then they all try to upsell you to that next cabin. And sometimes it is a policy thing where you say, yeah, you can do that. In many of the companies that I work with, the basic economy is out of policy. Yep. Show it, but don't let them book it because I know they're going to complain about it. All right, but the broader point is, what should we do when suppliers do go directly to your consumers?
So I think that the reason why suppliers do that is because, again, with these Latin American analogies, but they say that, you know, corruption exists to solve for an inefficiency of the system. So if, whether that's true or not, that's something else, but that's what they say. But if you bring it back to travel, right, if these suppliers are having to reach out, that means that we have to do a better job as a travel ecosystem to make sure that the right offering is getting to the end traveler. Whether that is the airline, you know, a car rental, hotel, even Uber, right? Uber starts to reach out to say, hey, I know you're going to be in the Alexandria area, you know, we extra ride or extra discount. So if as an ecosystem we are able to provide a channel where those upselling capabilities take place and then incorporate them into our policy, That's a huge thing. And it's an area of opportunity also because it's also an improved experience for the end traveler, right? So again, bringing it back to the data, the patterns, the traveler, and being able to analyze the ecosystem of who uses our policy, we might want to define right off the bat that, you know, by definition, these travelers get access to upsell capabilities, and then it's just orchestrating the fact that they can come through the system. Okay. But more often than not, that is occurring because there's a need there, because the traveler wants it, and for whatever reason, we are not supplying it. And even if the policy is, you're able to do this, but it is at your own expense, many times travelers are okay with that.
Right.
It's just making sure that through the proper channels, whether that's the corporate booking tool or expense, that's reflected in the right way.
Scott, does going direct concern you?
I've not heard of this being a problem for our travelers. I'm sure they're comfortable with looking at that email, and if they're like me, it's just about when you're looking for where your hotel is because you forgot to check it before that. But even if there was an upsell in there, I don't think it. You're traveling for work. You know that this is essentially what you're doing it for. I don't think that's necessarily a challenge. I think the messaging. Actually, I want to commend the Travel Management Office on this. Like for example, the DoD frequent rental program. Look, we just want a streamlined process where we don't hit that upsell, just get us to and out of the counter as quickly as possible. Where we can leverage our buying power to get those types of arrangements, I think the feedback from the travelers, yes, that's better. I like that better because that's faster, simpler, and easier for me. But I would just say that where they don't experience that, then there are feedback mechanisms where they can provide that either to, you know, when you get that email afterwards from the, how did you like your flight? If I really wanted to tell you something, I can tell you something that way too.
Got it.
So
Nick?
I've got maybe a bit of a different point of view. I think the travel industry as a whole does an absolutely rotten job of understanding consumers as employees. I think they see consumers as consumers, but they have a really tough time differentiating Nick Vernakis, who works for CWT. So I get, you know, I'm a frequent flyer on Delta thanks to my commute back and forth every week, and they see me as a highly valuable customer, but they don't see me as an employee of CWT. Right. And we, as a community, as a supplier community, it's incumbent upon us to work to connect those dots. And I just don't think we've done a very good job of that as a whole. So the idea of understanding it's not about the consumer at the end of the day, it's about this person as an employee. And that's a nuance that I think we're just beginning to understand.
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
I would just be, you know, cautious of that, Nick, and I know where you're coming from, and I'm not a millennial, unfortunately, nor am I Generation Z, but, and therefore I would agree, corporation first, corporate. However, when you talk about the younger demographics, I mean, there's tons of information out there saying that, you know, for example, U.S., full employment, you know, great statistics. The people that are entering the workforce, they actually state that they will look at the travel benefits within the job as an employee as part of the benefits of choosing between one job or another. Mm-hmm. So while compliance, like I said, I've got the corporate hat on. My corporation says you can't do it, I'm off. Right. But that's not what's out there. And as you said, they're only getting younger, right? They actually do see, well, what benefits, how are you going to allow me to use my own personal travel benefits that I've acquired within the workforce? And, you know, coming back to the survey that we did in 2018 about the digital traveler, over 70% of younger employees said that they would prefer a job where they have to travel over 50% of the time.
Prefer a job where they would have to travel 50% of the time. Right.
That's huge.
Yep.
And to think that we're going to be able to reel them into, well, this is the corporation and that's it.
They clearly view travel as a benefit, and the type of travel and how they travel will be very important to them.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any final comments on this one? Don, go ahead.
Employee opinion survey 1 year ago, for the first time ever, benefits were more important than pay.
Wow.
First time ever.
Interesting. Okay. Benefits more important than pay. First time ever. You guys have a shitty pay package? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I had to wake them up a little bit. All right, here we go. We did our 5 topics. Now we're going to move into what I call closer to the truth. In this particular case, I'm going to provide 2 statements. And I'm going to ask my panel to tell us which one they believe is closer to the truth. I'm going to also involve all of you in here, so be ready for this one. So first one up is, I took these 2 close to home. I hope I didn't screw up here, but the Pentagon finally plans defense travel system reforms. I didn't say that. The word finally was in the headline from the Military Times. I took it straight out. Okay. The business travel prototype is expected within 2 years. New systems will simultaneously lower cost, reduce workflow complexity, decrease time and effort spent by everyone from the traveler to the authorized official in the reimbursement process. Okay? And then finally, the prototype might also meet the department's audit readiness requirements, improve customer sat, and align to commercial industry best practices. That's a pretty tall order, if I say so myself. All right, so which statement is closer to the truth? As technology continues to advance, companies like Google, Amazon, and other tech giants continue to invest in technology designed to enhance the user experience. Which statement is closer to the truth? A, the plans to overhaul the DoD program over the next 24 months are timely and will serve the constituents well. Or B, you can see this one coming, by the time the present changes are delivered to the DoD program, they'll be outdated and need to be changed again. Okay, I'm not going to take that. I want a show of hands from this audience. A, how many say A?
We get
All right, we got a few people. Oh, okay, pretty good. You got to say A. I say A. All right. How about B? Everybody else is B? Anybody C? There is no C. Okay, audience.
I think
A,
this one
show
might
of hands. A. I swear this wasn't a trick
I
question.
think I paid the other ones off.
Okay, go ahead, you go first.
I think I'd prefer to give a verbal answer on this one.
Okay. Yes, please
so the
do.
challenge is, and this comes back to how does DoD buy things, right? We prefer commercial items over products that we develop because we can get them to market faster, right?
Absolutely.
So if I want to give everybody in a unit a handheld radio, there's a process to get that bought and get it out there. But that radio is also going to be technologically outdated in 18 months or 30, whatever. Range will be better, battery life will be better, something will be better. Well, but we're not buying a commercial product, we're buying a commercial service. And part of what we're buying out of a commercial service is the evergreen nature of keeping up with where technology is headed. So yes, I'm in the A camp.
Okay. Well, no, that makes perfect sense. It's perfectly rational because nothing stands still. I would say most of the platforms out there are outdated 6 months after, right? You know, if you look at Moore's Law, technology every 6 months, you know, the capacity doubles, right? So if you're not keeping pace, have a new user interface, doing something different, you will fall out of pace. All right, so why'd you say what you said, Jamie? You said A.
I did.
Okay.
Well, partly plays into what Scott said. I do agree that things will continue to evolve over the next 24 months, but one of the things I think DTMO and DMDC have done really well is focused on the right things, and they're moving at a really fair pace, right? So I do think that the combination of doing the right thing coupled by keeping the momentum going is allowing us to really get things done in a way that we don't often see in the typical government pace.
Yep.
And then again, to your point, whatever platforms you're using have to keep up with the changing times and changing needs.
Don?
That last piece was the piece that I was going to comment. I mean, obviously, everything has to be built in the right spec on day one, but the ability to keep up with the changes that come to our market, no matter if we see it today or if we don't see it coming and it comes anyway, is the key to building the process. So I think the program is fine when it comes out, but it has to keep evolving.
Has to be iterative,
Absolutely.
constantly looking for
Agile.
constantly looking to adapt. Erica, anything to add?
Yeah, no, just that I think a lot of work has been placed into the renovation of the system and partnering up with Concur. And, you know, Mr. Booth said it earlier, if customization can be avoided, right, then, yeah, they will be able to move faster. And I think that this thing about a legacy system that lasted 20 years is a thing of the past. I think that, you know, the innovation and the technology will just keep renewing it, and
Nick,
it will be done.
anything to add? Close us out on this one?
Nothing to add, no.
Okay, good. Let's go to our next one. Introducing American Forces Travel, Department of Defense and Priceline unveil a deeply discounted leisure travel site exclusive to U.S. military community. That just happened a month or so ago. Active members of U.S. military, their families, certain disabled vets, the Defense Department civilian employees are eligible to use the site and take advantage of discounts of up to 60%. That's all good news. Department of Defense and various military branches are now marketing the site to the military. So there you go. Let's take our collective strength. You people not only travel for work, but now you're going to travel for leisure. Why not take advantage of some deals at Priceline? Okay, so which statement is then closer to the truth? The American Forces Travel site could open a Pandora's box as active military personnel get further exposed to the ease and options of a consumer travel site, or the American Forces Travel Initiative will have no negative impact on government travel because these people understand the difference between leisure and work travel. Show of hands. How many of you say A, Pandora's box? This is a little dangerous for us. Okay, the rest of you are in the B camp. The rest of you have to take a leak like me. Okay, I didn't say that. Jamie, A or B?
Can I get a C?
You can get a C. Go ahead. Sure.
Well, so I like B. One,
Like-
I think it's fantastic, right? We should be offering our U.S. military and the
Deals.
folks you mentioned.
Absolutely.
My one problem with B is just the no negative, right? It's so 100%. I feel like there's a little bit of room for negative impacts, but I'm more of a B.
More to B,
But
but
I
there
think-
might be a little bit of A
Yeah, I
in
mean, I
there.
think
Little
it
risk.
again goes back to education and awareness.
I'm B as well, and it's all about education. I mean, you have to get out.
Let 'em
and-
know what's out there.
They got to know what's out there.
Yep. Nick, I'm going to go down to you. A or B?
Well, I think exposing the service members to high-quality commercial-grade tools is great. The only nuance is that a lot of service members tack on leisure travel
To
that's
their
connected to
business
their
travel. Anyway.
official travel, and that service cannot be met by a pure consumer tool.
Got it. Scott?
I think we have this problem today. I think they travel on modern
already
solutions
out
today.
there.
The fact that they can get great deals or through this opportunity, I think it's a good example of how we can use our buying power. But this isn't really a new problem.
No
so
big, no
I'm
big
definitely
deal,
B.
right? So in other words, they've already exposed to it in other places? All right, cool. Erica, anything to close us on this one?
I think this was happening already. They just bundled it.
Got it. All right, let's go to the videotape. We got questions from our audience. Go ahead, you knock
I
'em.
do, and this one's more of a comment, and it may be directly related to this particular closer to the truth. So let me read this. As the younger generation, quote unquote, I do not want to see my government travel in my social space. I'm not going to follow your Instagram page. All I want is to expedite the official travel process so it's over and I get reimbursed.
Okay. Fair enough. Sounds like a very practical young lady or fella.
At some point, when do we ask, as industry leaders, government reps, travelers, and most importantly taxpayers, how do we incentivize the traveler to efficiently use the government funds? I would like to see more time and effort put into principal agent modeling rather than chasing outdated technologies and platforms.
Okay, that's a statement. Anybody disagree with that? That person running for office, they got to vote. 5 votes. All right, give me the next one.
A couple questions that are kind of related to what I think may be related to your 2 tiers of industries. And something I noticed that was a commonality of all of them connect directly to a consumer. And in corporate travel and the government travel world, you've got the macro buyers that aren't necessarily the consumers. And so it's how do you get that? You get where are you getting the feedback from in terms of how well this ecosystem's working. And so one of the questions within that space is there seems to always be a focus on improvements, innovations for the traveler. What improvements will be made for other users of the travel ecosystem, such as the approvers, the admin staff, the financial staff?
That's a great question. Go ahead.
We certainly have that part. You saw it in the,
Yes,
the
in
announcement.
your initiative.
Part of our mission is to really save everyone's time through the process, because that time is then valuable time you can spend on other tasks that are, that all supports the mission, but you can be more effective in what you do with that more time. So absolutely, that's part of the workflow that we've envisioned for the new tool, and for the financial side as well, yes.
Yep, and Jamie, I'm assuming you got that at the same thing, right? Because you got the whole workflow with approval, from cradle to grave. You've also got to deal with everybody else who's involved.
That's right. Support, right? We talk at Concur, the best support case is the one never written, right? So it's the same thing around the administrators, lead DTAs, those folks. We need to look at the entire process, making the configurations to manage more easily than they have today. So certainly there's time savings and improved user experience to create along the entire workflow.
Yep, Don?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, we the least amount of times we have to touch something,
The better off.
the better off
it
we are.
is. All right. Yeah, and I would say just at a macro level, when you talk about the concepts, it doesn't matter if you're talking about a traveler, a travel arranger, a travel approver, somebody in accounts payable. You're trying to make it fast, easy, simple, intuitive, personal to all of them, right? That's just a general concept. These companies have reached out and done a really good job of influencing the way people think and work and act. So,
Tony,
Okay.
I have a question. Me
Yes.
right here. Sorry, I didn't want to intrude.
No.
But I have a question.
do it.
Erica, you kicked off wonderfully talking about predictive analytics. It's something that we've heard for quite some time, and especially with the trends of our traveler. Anything that the panel can share of some things that their disciplines are deploying, talking about predictive analytics? We've used big strokes here. And then two, Erica, you talked about IBM, the Watson division. Another thing we struggle with is the compliance. There's a lot of noise on these travel sites. Do you feel that that's something we will see deployed in 2020, maybe even sooner?
All right, first question first is predictive analytics. Who's got an example, anything you're doing? There we go, we got a couple. So Nick, go ahead.
So maybe not specific to the government market, if only because the City Pair program is so tightly packed. But there's certainly services available where you can kind of predict the right time to buy an air ticket based on the way things fluctuate. So CWT's invested quite a lot of our capital in trying to not just optimize the price post-purchase, which we're one of several who are doing that, but really up front, when's the right time to buy? And to me, that's just a very good example of, should I book now or should I wait?
Great example. Don, you were going to?
Predictive analytics for fleet movement. We got 2 million vehicles. They need to be in the right place at the right time, and we use different types of predictive analytics to make sure that happens.
More cars early February in Atlanta,
Yeah.
Super Bowl, right? Whatever it is.
Sure.
Okay. Anything more closer to home? Because I have one example. I'll give my company. Go ahead.
Hurricanes,
Hurricanes.
natural disasters,
Yep.
fires. We've been able to maneuver vehicles. I mean, obviously, it's coming if the weather forecast is typically right when it comes to a hurricane. You get vehicles in place. We placed 20,000 vehicles in Houston when they had their most recent hurricane and before the hurricane happened.
Yeah, so you're using predictive analytics to inform an experience where you're kind of avoiding something or potentially dealing with something. Yeah, good examples. I'll give you one from our company. My company, Serco, small online booking tool company in Australia and New Zealand. We do two things leveraging predictive analytics. The first page of our search will leverage the last 3 searches, the last 5 searches you did. And we don't actually make you fill in a box. We ask you a question, where are you going? So that's the first thing we do. That's a little different. We say, where are you going? If you've gone to the same place 3 weeks in a row, we'll actually say, are you going back to Boston? Because you've been there 3 times in a row. The other thing we do is on the response page, you can sort the search in a list view, in a grid view, in a suggested view. If you do that 2 times in a row, you edit the search to a particular way, we will edit it for you the 3rd time, right? So we're starting to adapt to your use of the tool. So very small instances of where we're using AI or predictive analytics to change the experience. Okay, another question from our audience?
Let me find it as things bounce around as we have pop-ups here on the app.
No problem.
This one's from the consumer side of it, the traveler itself. With GSA and DTMO driving so many limitations, on flight and lodging options, where's the flexibility for the traveler to determine what's right for them?
Okay, so with so many options out there, how do you narrow it down? Again, how do you make it personal? What's appropriate to them? What are you guys doing in that area? Scott?
I think the first thing is, at least from a tool perspective, to show them as many things that you can that are in the realm of this is what's possible for you, and allow them to make educated decisions. And then the next piece of it is making sure that whether it's the supervisor or someone else who is an approver, that there's someone in that chain who has the ability to give them, empowered to give them permission to do a particular thing, if it's different, which is how our process works. Where possible, I think we'd be glad to have them even use more flexibility as long as there's a lower dollar threshold. This is one of the initiatives that we started probably 2 years ago. If it's under a certain amount, maybe the traveler can just be the decider on a particular thing, but we still have some processes to work out before that becomes reality.
So Nick, would you work towards saying all of these options are okay? Now you can pick whatever you want. Is that kind of where you would suggest it go?
Yeah, I think search can be, the return from a search can be improved pretty dramatically. I think there's a lot of instances of like traveler FOMO, right? There's something better out there I can go find. I just need to invest 4.5 hours of my time to do so. But there's nobody up here who's not working to aggregate as much of that stuff as possible. Not just the private stuff, the city pair program, Fedrooms, the integrated lodging program, but public rates as well. So there's nothing stopping us as an industry saying, hey, here's the best program rate that we found, but here are comparable public rates, assuming that those then start meeting some of the thresholds, and then whatever trade-offs might be associated to some of those. But
so filter out all the noise, put them in a bucket. Don't narrowly say you have to take this. Here's 6 options that would work. You figure it out. Okay, good. Anybody else? Anything to add here?
This is something I know with GSA we've gone back and forth on this for years, because we do have sort of green, yellow, red indicators. This is your set of choices. And it's this balance between, we give you 100 available hotels in a 5-mile radius, and somehow inevitably we get this traveler feedback that there was this one property 6 miles out, you had 150 to choose from, and they're like, but I went to this other site and you didn't show this. And so it's really, are you mining through 150 results? If I give you 20 or 30 flight hotel, that I don't know if you have that too, but we're trying to find what's that right amount of choice before it's overload, but ensuring that it follows cost and security policy. It's FEMA approved hotels or in the Fedrooms program.
Part of what Amazon does really well is they curate content.
Yep.
They've got access to everything. They curate it down based on who you are, based on your spending patterns, all
The
of those.
personalization piece, right?
Yep,
If you go to
absolutely.
Boston 3 weeks in a row and you stayed at the Marriott every single time, well, maybe that 4th time I should just put it at the top and say, I see you've done that. I'm probably gonna, stay at that same property.
And if you take that and you say, I've stayed at Marriott 4 times in a row, I'm going to a new city, you're probably going to
Want a
stay in
Marriott.
that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the little things that people should do. All right, we got a couple more minutes on the clock. I want to end off with the final closing advice. I asked all of you to prepare. If you remember on that preparation call that we had, we actually didn't have no. So here's the closing advice. What is the biggest risk for the government travel going forward? Biggest risk for the government travel going forward. Nick?
Awesome. You guys cannot steal my thunder. Letting perfection get in the way of progress.
Imperfection. Okay.
Letting perfection get in the way of progress. And I think we heard on the floor this morning that
we're not going to do that.
We're going to charge forward, and it won't necessarily be perfect, but it will be better. Trying to solve for, I think, modernization cannot be a project. At some point, it's going to be a lifestyle.
Lifeblood.
You will live, eat, and breathe modernization. You ought to be modernizing
all the time
as a routine part of, the day-to-day. So, don't let the idea of solving for every last combination and permutation get in the way of getting something out there that's going to solve 80% of the problems.
Okay.
And that is not happening, by the way.
Exactly. Scott, biggest risk?
once upon a time when we used plain old telephone service, they had the last mile problem of how do you get to the actual point that someone needs to use the telephone service from. We're going to have that same challenge with essentially what Mr. Booth talked about, the process that will get us to the point where we can turn off the legacy system because we've solved all the problems in the new. The edge cases, all of those things that'll, essentially the 20 of the 80-20 rule, that's what we're going to be fighting the hardest as we go.
All right, cool. Erica, biggest risk?
I think that government will not be an exception to the use of technologies for artificial intelligence, data analytics, predictive analytics. I just think that that's going to be incorporated in the tools that they use. So I think the biggest risk of that, and as things sit in the cloud, will be security. And therefore, moving forward, some form of either, blockchain or some type of security mechanism might have to be adopted as they move into
So
this.
be careful on the security side. Don, biggest risk?
Mine was security as well. I mean,
Security.
just with the whole world changing like it is, and we're trying to make advancements so quickly, we just have to be very careful when we do things for our security goes.
Absolutely do. Jamie?
I agree with everyone. I'd say the other thing would be, as we've talked a bit about here, each of our companies or organizations, we aren't trying to be all things to all people. So this idea of these councils coming together and where we can, Nick and I talk a lot about this, where can we do it? My company's best at and provide that to you, and you do what you're best at and figure out how we integrate and come together. I think not doing that is a huge risk.
Biggest
There's
risk,
so much
not getting
benefit to
everybody.
you if we all come together and
I
do
like
the thing
that one.
we're
Biggest
best
risk,
at.
not getting all the stakeholders in a room and saying, let's all figure this out together. Okay, final closing advice. What one piece of advice would you offer our audience today? Jamie, I'm going to start with you.
Challenge the status quo. Don't do the, we just always did it this way.
Very good. Don?
Her last answer was my question. No, that's okay. In regards to, we got to work together. And I think that if we're much stronger together than we are apart.
Get everybody in the room. Erica, piece of advice?
Use technology to make the new come in compliance with the old.
Use technology?
Use
bridge the gap.
technology, yeah.
Yep.
Bridge the gap.
Scott?
I would just say make sure that we hear your voice because we're very focused on what we're doing from a prototype perspective. This is speaking as the program manager for this effort. There are lots of people here who would be glad to hear what you have to say. We also want to hear what you have to say, but we don't want to miss something. Obviously, we want to move out smartly and not be afraid of missing out either, but definitely we want to hear the voices.
Hear the voice.
Hear the stakeholders.
Talk up. Don't be shy. There you go. Round of applause. Like.
Uh-oh, who was that?
And Nick, close us down. Piece of advice.
Trust your employees.
Trust your employees.
Trust your employees.
I love it.
They want to do do the right thing. Trust
Speaking
your
of
employees.
trust, why don't we lay our trust in these subject matter experts? How about a round of applause, everybody? Thank you all. Great job. Andy, over to you. Thank you, my friend.
I got to admit, Tony is a talented expert on running a panel, and I think everybody will also agree that the panel experts were profound in their advice. And Tony, if you wanted to get closer to the truth, I think we did. And that was a great way to close it out with those, I thought, nuggets of leadership and wisdom there at the end. So right now, we're gonna take a break until 11:45, and at that time we're gonna be back in. We're gonna have one more keynote speaker. Dominic Del Molino is gonna speak from Accenture, and he's gonna speak to us on the fourth industrial revolution. I think you'll see that that discussion will really fold in nicely with what we just heard from our panel and from Mr. Booth. So thank you very much. Be back at 11:45.